Hello and welcome to this video on respiration and metabolism. Respiration is the transfer of energy from glucose and occurs in every cell. That word transfer is really critical actually, so try and use that as often as you possibly can in this context. The energy that is transferred or released from glucose is put to several uses in an organism. If that organism has muscles, that energy is used to help those muscles contract so that organism can move. If it's a warm-blooded organism such as a bird or a mammal, some of that energy goes towards keeping those animals warm. In plants, this energy could be used to actively transport minerals from the soil into the roots and then into the rest of the plant. The one I'm kind of more concerned with here in this video, and I will elaborate on, is using the energy to build larger molecules from smaller ones. An example would be glucose, which is relatively small, building up into much larger storage molecules, such as starch, which is the way plants store glucose, or glycogen, which is how glucose is stored in mammals. Glucose can also be converted into cellulose, which helps to strengthen the cell walls of plants. Glucose can also be combined in plants with nitrate ions that are derived from the soil to form amino acids, and amino acids in all life forms are combined or linked to form proteins, which are very large molecules indeed. One molecule of glycerol will be combined with 3 fatty acid tails to form lipids or fats. And all of these examples are endothermic reactions, which means that they take in energy from the surroundings, and they're taking in the energy that's been transferred from glucose in respiration. Other reactions in the body could be exothermic, so respiration is an exothermic reaction that releases or transfers energy to the surroundings. Another reaction that does this is the breakdown of excess protein into urea. This urea then gets excreted as part of your urine. So you have all these endothermic reactions happening as well as all these exothermic reactions happening, and the kind of balance between them, or the sum of all these reactions, is called your metabolism. And your metabolism naturally varies from individual to individual, but your lifestyle choices, the amount of exercise you do, your diet, can influence your metabolism too. Now, there are 2 different versions of the respiration reaction, dependent on what the organism is actually doing at the time. Most of the time, an organism is respiring aerobically, so that glucose is broken down via oxidation, so oxygen is reacted with glucose to produce the products carbon dioxide and water, and this actually releases a lot of energy in the form of ATP. So ATP is the energy currency molecule of all living things, and 32 molecules of ATP is quite a lot. You need to know this word equation, but you may also need to be able to recognise the symbol equation. So the formula for glucose is C6H12O6, the formula for oxygen is O2, CO2 for carbon dioxide, and H2O for water. Some of you, if you're doing more advanced exam question, might have to balance this equation. As it stands, it's not balanced. And rather than go through the whole process of balancing equations, which would require a separate video, just remember that to make 1 molecule of glucose, you need 6 of all the other things. So 6 oxygen, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, and 6 molecules of water. And if you've already seen the videos on photosynthesis, it is exactly the same reaction, but back to front. Anaerobic respiration occurs more rarely, and it occurs during vigorous activity such as sprinting or bodybuilding, weightlifting, that sort of thing. Here your muscles are working exceptionally hard, and their demands for oxygen are higher than the supply that they receive. And as a result, the glucose doesn't get oxidized and it doesn't break down completely. The products do vary depending on the organism that this is happening in. In organisms with muscle cells, this glucose is broken down into lactic acid, just that. And in plants and fungi, anaerobic respiration leads to ethanol and carbon dioxide being produced from glucose. The amount of energy released from this reaction is significantly less than that of aerobic respiration, generating only 2 molecules of ATP, and as a result, this is a non-sustainable form of respiration. It can only last for short durations of time. In fungi, anaerobic respiration gets its own name, which is fermentation, and this is of economical importance because it allows us to make bread and alcoholic drinks. In an exam, it's often the case that you'll be asked to compare these 2 forms of respiration. Always mention the similarities as well as the differences. So what's similar about these 2 reactions is that they both release energy and they both release or transfer that energy from glucose. What is different is that one uses oxygen and one doesn't, and the products are different as well. So carbon dioxide and water in aerobic respiration, lactic acid and just that in anaerobic respiration in muscle cells, and in plants and fungi, yes, you've got the carbon dioxide like you do in aerobic respiration, but you've also got ethanol. Anaerobic respiration is the incomplete breakdown of glucose, while aerobic respiration is the complete breakdown or oxidation of glucose. And because it's a complete breakdown, all the energy locked up in that glucose is transferred into these ATP molecules. So to put this into a context, if somebody was to start an exercise class, they're more than likely to start respiring aerobically because that's the kind of standard form of respiration. And here glucose combines with oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water and loads of energy. Eventually the exercise could intensify and the muscles are working at a level that demands more oxygen than can be supplied. Here glucose is incompletely broken down to form lactic acid, and lactic acid builds up in the muscles and leads to muscle fatigue. Eventually a person needs to stop the exercise due to this muscle fatigue, and then the body needs to deal with the lactic acid that's been built up. Now the next part of the video where we talk about how this lactic acid is removed is only for higher tier students, so if you're not in that category, please stop watching. Lactic acid initially is dealt with in the muscle cells by combining with oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water. This is why at the end of an anaerobic form of exercise, a person will actually continue breathing at a very heavy rate instead of their breathing rate starting to fall. And this is because depending on how much lactic acid you've been producing in that period of time that you've been exercising, you will need a certain proportion of oxygen to break down that lactic acid, and the amount of oxygen needed to break down the accumulated lactic acid is known as the oxygen debt. So if you've got more lactic acid in your bloodstream or in those cells, you need to take in more oxygen, so your breathing rate will have to stay higher after the exercise than somebody who's just built up a little bit of lactic acid. And this is often why you see somebody who's just done like a 100-metre sprint, is curled over and breathing incredibly heavily after a race. Some athletes actually, during that 100-metre sprint, would hold their breath because they're going to respire anaerobically. There's no point breathing in that short space of time because the oxygen simply won't get to the cells that need it. The oxygen gets repaid back after the exercise has finished. There is another coping mechanism that the body has to remove this lactic acid, and that is to transfer the lactic acid out of the cells via the blood to the liver, and the liver can actually convert that lactic acid back into glucose. So there you have respiration and metabolism. Thank you very much for watching and good luck.